Today's the first Thursday in February. That means hundreds of religious leaders and lawmakers come together for the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. 70 countries are represented in an annual event that has drawn the president going back to the days of Dwight Eisenhower. Today, this is what a crowd of the faithful heard from President Donald Trump about today's keynote speaker.
Thank you as well to Senate Chaplain Barry Black for his moving words. And I don't know, Chaplain, whether or not that's an appointed position. Is that an appointed position? I don't even know if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, but I'm appointing you for another year. The hell with it.
The hell with it? In front of a group of religious leaders? But believe it or not, that was just a warm-up as Donald Trump kind of randomly lashed out at Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, as you know, replaced him on The Apprentice.
The ratings went right down the tubes. It's been a total disaster. And I want to just pray for Arnold, if we can, for those ratings, okay?
They're not done yet. No, Arnold quickly responded on Twitter.
Hey, Donald, I have a great idea. Why don't we switch jobs? You take over TV because you're such an expert in ratings, and I take over your job. And then people can finally sleep comfortably again.
So here we are, approaching the 2-week anniversary of the Trump presidency. Instead of waiting for the obligatory 100 days, we thought we'd do an evaluation tonight of how it's going so far. One caution, we will not be estimating the size of the inaugural crowd. Joining me are Yascha Mounk, a lecturer in government at Harvard University. He's a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal and Slate. Good to see you. Paul DeBelay is an assistant professor of political science at LaSalle College who worked on the presidential campaigns of now Senators John McCain and Lamar Alexander. Good to see you, Paul. Thanks for
being here,
Jim. What do we know about Donald Trump 2 weeks in that we didn't know before, if anything, Paul?
Perhaps he's a little more volatile than we might have thought during the campaign, and I think that's stretching it somewhat. But usually, most presidents discover there's a big difference between running for president and actually governing the country. And for better or for worse, I don't think Donald Trump has kind of learned that lesson yet. And it'll be interesting to see how he picks up on that over the next few months.
You wrote, Yascha, post-election but pre-inaugural, that people always underestimate Donald. Are they still underestimating him 13 days into this presidency?
I think so. The fight of the executive order on immigration is a good example of that.
What do you mean, why?
Everybody I know thinks that it's been a huge disaster for the Trump administration, that the people are rebelling against it, and then we see in polls that actually a lot of Americans approve of it. Now, I disagree strongly with the order, but I think as people who are very concerned about what Donald Trump is doing to the country, we have to recognize that things play differently for many Americans than we do in our liberal bubbles.
Well, it's not just that, don't you think? I mean, there's a debate. Is it incompetence, they didn't vet it, or is it a belief that government by chaos works to his advantage because it puts everybody on the defensive? And so far, it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, so that's the story, that governing is really hard, it's really difficult to get things done, and Trump won't have the patience to do it, he doesn't have the professionalism to do it. But you can destroy things in government pretty easy. You can pass an executive order that doesn't think through whether green card holders are going to be affected, that doesn't think through what's actually going to be happening at the airports. But if you don't mind, if you're happy with a government doing violent things to people and just sowing chaos, you can really change what's happening in this country.
Well, let me disagree with you here. I think destruction is easier than construction generally, but it seems to me once the people have a right, taking it away is pretty difficult. So let's talk about Obamacare.
Yeah.
We started on Friday of the inauguration with, quote, easing the burden, whatever that means. It was repeal, then it was repeal and replace, and now it's repair. So does that, I mean, that's the common nomenclature of the last couple of days. Does that suggest a different strategy or a different endgame for Republicans who'd been talking about just gutting the thing?
I mean, I think healthcare is the one bit in which Republicans are in real trouble, because they have to do something. They can't just decide, you know what, we're going to leave everything that's there in place, because they've been railing against Obamacare all of this while. And as soon as they do anything, it doesn't matter whether they call it repair, whether they call it replace, they're going to own it. And owning healthcare is toxic, because people dislike the healthcare system, and whoever happens to own it gets the blame for it.
The dog catching the carpet over. You know this, 75% of people say they either oppose repeal, or if there is repeal, they want simultaneous replacement, a la what Donald Trump said. Your former client, Lamar Alexander, is chair of the key committee in the Senate. He seems to be a more cautious Obamacare guy than the sort of raw meat rhetoric.
Well, Lamar Alexander is a very, very thoughtful, very deliberative man, and he's been in government a long time, as opposed to somebody like President Trump, who finally just arrived and is trying to make his governed by by fear or by diktat
But he's representative of the Republicans who are saying, just like they said in that off-the-record thing in Philadelphia, we can't just do this rhetorical assault on health care that was extended to 20 million people like we did when we didn't have a Republican president.
That's correct, but he's a reasonable man, he's a pragmatist, and he's looking to do what's right for a majority.
Okay, can we talk about a man who's generally seen as unreasonable, but maybe a pragmatist, Steve Bannon?
Yeah.
New York Times in an editorial called him President Bannon the other day. Time magazine calls him the great manipulator. Here's some of the things he said about what the profession that I do. The media should keep its mouth shut. The media here is the opposition party, among the most dishonest people on earth. You know, I go back and forth every single day. Is this guy Rasputin to Donald Trump, or is he just a trusted advisor who is really close to the president? Which is he?
Steve Bannon is really influential, but I think what actually matters is that the authoritarian instincts come from Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump is not an ideologue like Steve Bannon is, or like people like Viktor Orban in Hungary, Kaczynski in Poland.
His appointments have been ideological?
They have been, but I think Donald Trump doesn't think that he's going to destroy freedom in this country. Donald Trump doesn't think that he wants to bundle all of the power in the White House. He just has instincts, but he dislikes being criticized. He doesn't like it when his power is curtailed, and that's enough to propel his presidency into really dangerous territory. So I actually think...
And Bannon worries about the details? Is that what you're saying?
And Bannon certainly is happy to see him go in that direction. He's an ideologue who's going to be profiting from that. But I actually worry more about Trump's instinct and his mentality than I worry about Steve Bannon.
Do you worry about his instinct and mentality?
I worry about his attention span. I worry about his ability to see through the forest and actually see the trees, which he doesn't do. And he doesn't maintain his focus on anything long enough to actually carry it through to fruition.
So you must be thrilled that he's now in the National Security Council instead of the Joint Chiefs of Staff chair.
I'm delighted to be on.
Can we stay on Bannon, though, just for a couple of seconds here? They used to refer to Karl Rove respectfully, but disrespectfully to George W. as Bush's brain. Is that what Bannon is, or is he just, as was suggested a minute ago, the guy who effectuates the desires of the president?
I don't think he's President Trump's brain at all. President Trump knows what he wants to do. He depends on others to implement it, and that's what we're going to see from Steve Bannon.
Let's move to this new world order. America First is a really good slogan that's very easy for people to remember, and also very easy if you feel your school isn't modern enough and your bridge is about to fall down and all that sort of stuff. So is he really at America First? I'm not worrying about regime change. I'm going to fix what is broken here. Or is there an interventionist somewhere in that body of that man?
Look, what you ideally want is a stable international order which avoids conflicts precisely because countries are scared of the might of the United States. And in that case, you can ideally avoid wars even while you have real American leadership in the world. What you have now is complete unpredictability from the United States. Doing everything within the short term in the country, but over the long run, this means that America's allies are going to look to other partners like Russia and China. It means that there's lots of unnecessary instability and conflict, and so these two things can go together.
Let's talk about unnecessary conflict. Here's Donald Trump responding to criticism of his, let's call it, abbreviated phone conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia. Here's the President.
When you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. They're tough. We have to be tough. It's time we're going to be a little tough, folks. We're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually. It's not going to happen anymore.
You know, Chuck Todd from Meet the Press was on a radio show today, and he jokingly said, I didn't know the new axis of evil was Mexico, Australia, and Germany. I mean, so does this kind of behavior, like what he did on the phone apparently with the Australian guy, both bragging about his electoral victory, saying it's the worst conversation I've had, rejecting this thing, does that worry you, or is this just the art of the deal in the Oval Office?
You know, I think the president's going to do what the president's going to do. Does it worry me that it's creating more instability in the world, especially among people who are normally our allies, like Australia?
So it does worry you?
It does worry me.
Are you hopeful?
I'm sorry?
Are you hopeful?
I'm always hopeful.
But that sounds like a general... You wrote on Slate, I think today, that you're hopeful. Why are you hopeful?
Well, I'm hopeful because I'm very afraid, because I think that Trump is now on his path to really attacking the basic institutions of this country. So what
makes you hopeful?
What makes me hopeful is that I thought that Americans might slumber through it, and the last 2 weeks make me think that they won't. That this republic is going to put up a hell of a fight if somebody is going to try to destroy our institutions.
Yasha, it's good to see you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Paul, great to meet you. Thanks so much. Good to see you, gentlemen. Thank you.